At a ceremony at the Kremlin this morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared 4 Ukrainian regions now would become a part of Russia. This follows those illegal staged referendums that Putin claimed this morning were, quote, unequivocal. The annexed regions in eastern and southern Ukraine represent 15% of the country, about 40,000 square miles. President Biden said yesterday the United States would never recognize Russia's claim to that Ukrainian territory. Putin previously has warned of a nuclear response if any threat is made against Russian land. That obviously now could include those 4 Ukrainian regions. For more, let's bring in NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons. Keir, this has been quite an address. I touched on the part where he's going to annex these 4 new places after those so-called sham referendums, but also accusing the United States of blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline and making other outlandish claims about what the West has been up to and what Ukraine itself has been up to.
That's right, Willie. Those 4 areas, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, Kherson and Luhansk, are the areas in that eastern part of Ukraine, annexed now. I mean, that's the news, that they have now been annexed by Russia. There is some bureaucratic loopholes to go through as far as the Russians are concerned. Obviously, none of this will be accepted by the international community after those votes in those areas that are widely discredited outside of those areas and outside of Russia. So that's the news. And then we have this fiery speech from President Putin, things that people will recognize, attacking the West, insisting that Ukraine is part of Russia. And you could argue in some ways going further, accusing the West of wanting to colonize Russia, just as critics of President Putin accuse him of effectively trying to kind of reheat a colonial Russia from the 19th century. That at the same time, Putin saying, well, no, the West is trying to break up Russia and own Russia, if you like. So the rhetoric continues from President Putin. I mean, the reality is, and there are concerts now in Moscow, crowds brought in, encouraged to come, you could say, by the Kremlin in order to sort of celebrate this moment of annexation, just the same as we saw in 2014 when Crimea was annexed. So all of that is happening, but it doesn't really disguise the reality that this is the biggest political crisis for President Putin that he's ever faced. The simple political challenge for him, really, the thing that goes to the heart of his problem, to be honest, is the mobilization that he announced, because we are hearing from villages and towns in Russia of deep disquiet, places that I have been to many times. Just to paint a picture, Willie, the kinds of places where people watch cable, the Russian version of cable or satellite TV, the Russian channels that are piping out propaganda and are very much in support of President Putin. Those kinds of places are now learning that their sons and brothers and fathers are going to have to go and fight. And of course, politics, it can be so simple in many ways, can't it? And everybody will recognize that politically, when a decision by a leader reaches right into your family, into the heart of your community, and has a real impact in the people around you, the people that you love, that has a real impact on what people think. Now, President Putin still has a lot of support in Russia, but again, this is you could easily say a crisis for him. The question for the world, and it is a deeply disturbing question, is what does he do next?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? Because just a few moments ago, President Putin said of the citizens of those 4 regions that he's now illegally annexed, quote, they have become our citizens forever, warning the West that an attack there would be an attack on Russia. So what does this portend for the war now, strategically, politically? What does it mean now that he has said, in a way, that these 4 regions belong to Russia?
Well, the supposition is that what he is going to try to do, and what he's trying to indicate, particularly with the nuclear threats, is to threaten the West and Ukraine, that if Ukraine, backed by the West, attempts to take these areas back, that he will threaten a nuclear strike or some kind of, ratcheting up of the conflict and the conflict with the West. I think we have to be careful with this, Willie. There aren't any signs, as far as we know from Western intelligence, that there have been actual movements, actual changes in Russia's nuclear capability. In other words, a lot of words, but no sign of any action. if there were to begin to be some kind of indications that Russia was shifting its nuclear readiness, if you like, if you want to put it that way, then I think that would worry people deeply. They have made these nuclear threats in the past, and so far, no real change. So the trouble with President Putin is that for the entire time that he has been president, and by his own account, he has argued that when you're in a corner, just keep fighting. And he claims that that goes back to his childhood. The question is now, he's in a corner. How much is he going to keep fighting? And what does President Putin do if, he continues to lose this conflict? How does he respond to that? Because he's never really had to face that kind of a scenario. Again, all bets are off in a certain kind of sense. Having said that, though, and there's another point to make which I think is very, very important. This is a man who, throughout the whole of coronavirus, protected himself from coronavirus. He was worried about his own safety. So a countervailing view, and I think it's an important one, would be that he's not going to do anything that might put him at risk. And that, of course, would include a nuclear conflict with the West.
Yeah, extraordinary for today, though. The news is he claims Russia has annexed those 4 territories and warning the West, if you join in this fight and you do attack those territories, it will be attack on Russia. NBC's Keir Simmons, thank you for explaining it all to us. We always appreciate it.